While surrounded by a thick and frightening aura, Randolph told himself that it had finally appeared. The greater god who guards the star, a gigantic serpent with red eyes, was now in front of him, staring directly at him, the one called Ancient King Dramat. As Randolph watched it, he felt its overwhelming power. This time, he became nervous. He wondered to himself if this was the one they called the Mountain Guardian of the Sanctuary. While Randolph was deep in thought, Isabella interrupted him, asking if he really thought she was going to face the Mountain Guardian for him, right? Randolph looked at Isabella and answered her question, telling her she didn't need to worry because even if it looked scary, it was actually kind and gentle. Randolph was about to add that it didn't attack recklessly and never initiated fights, when suddenly it did everything he said it would not do. It moved fast and charged as if ready to devour any enemy alive. It quickly attacked Isabella. Luckily, Isabella was always prepared and managed to defend herself. She swiftly dodged Dramat's attack. But even though she dodged, she still fell and dropped the weapon she was holding. Randolph did not expect this. Everything happened too fast, and he couldn't believe Dramat attacked immediately. It turned out Isabella didn't fully avoid the attack because a small stone hit her head. She looked at Randolph in anger, and you could see on her face everything she wanted to say. Kind? Gentle? Maybe Randolph understood those words differently. While Dramat released a terrifying aura, Randolph still said the situation was strange because from what he remembered, Dramat was a gentle creature that guided you along the path. But Isabella angrily asked Randolph if it looked kind to him. While the two were arguing, Dramat spoke. It called Isabella the challenger of the sanctuary and said she must defeat him to prove she was worthy of the qualification. But Isabella quickly denied it, insisting she wasn't challenging the sanctuary. But Dramat said she defeated his guardian, and now she was denying it. Suddenly, Isabella remembered everything she had done. Yes, she was the one who faced and defeated the guardian. Dramat quickly attacked using his tail. Dramat looked serious as he attacked Isabella, telling her that if she failed to prove herself, she would not leave this place alive. Isabella swiftly dodged each strike while denying everything Dramat said. Dramat continued his attacks. Isabella continued dodging. She asked Randolph what she was supposed to do. At that moment, Randolph just watched what was happening. He didn't understand why Dramat was reacting this way. This wasn't what he remembered because the last time he did this mission, he didn't recall needing to defeat Dramat. Did something change? But suddenly, Randolph remembered something and his eyes widened. Good thing he recalled it now, or their snake princess Isabella would be in danger. Ancient King Dramat, the one called the Mountain Guardian who guards the star, a gigantic serpent with red eyes. According to Dramat's legend, he was an enchanted beast whose body grew and gained wisdom from the spiritual energy from the star. From what Randolph remembered, the last time he completed this mission, he was using the character Wilhelm, a level 10 5-star transcendent rank character. And when he completed the mission using Wilhelm, Dramat obediently guided him to the location of the star. The reason was simple. During that time, Wilhelm had the qualification. Randolph seriously reflected on the situation. If his understanding was correct, if you were weaker than Dramat, he would attack you. But back then, his character Wilhelm was extremely strong. Now, Randolph didn't know what to do. This time, Isabella could no longer avoid Dramat's powerful strike and was thrown away. She hit the ground hard, and the damage was clear on her face. She thought that because of the poison from the sanctuary, her body couldn't move properly, and perhaps coming here was a mistake, especially since Randolph wasn't even sure if she was truly a star bearer. The next attack from Dramat was already approaching. Isabella closed her eyes when she saw the attack coming right at her, but suddenly Randolph spoke and ordered Dromit to stop. Dromit froze mid-attack, stopping just inches away from Isabella. If it had hit, the result would not have been good. Dromit looked toward the source of the voice and saw a man standing not far away. He asked Randolph how he knew his true name. Randolph answered seriously and confidently. He said that his master, Wilhelm, had returned. The gigantic serpent slowly approached Randolph, stared at him, and asked again if he was really Wilhelm. It seemed he couldn't believe it. But suddenly, Dromit laughed. He laughed loudly right in front of Randolph. He angrily said that Randolph wasn't even ready to receive the star, that he was weaker than his own guardian, the golem. Was he really claiming to be Wilhelm? Of all beings, him? But Randolph didn't listen to Dromit's words and simply covered his ears. Dromit might have been emotional and raised his voice too much. Dromit laughed and told Randolph to listen carefully. Wilhelm was powerful and strong, a perfect transcendent worthy of being his master. But even so, despite his strength, Wilhelm still failed in the Demon Realm expedition, and all his stars vanished, meaning that he had truly died. Then Dromit said angrily that even if Wilhelm was gone, a weak being like Randolph had no right to speak his master's name, and he immediately attacked Randolph. But Randolph didn't flinch and simply told Dromit to respect the contract between them. Dromit froze again. He looked at Randolph and asked how he knew about the contract between him and Wilhelm, something no one else should know. But Randolph didn't answer and stared back at him. Randolph recalled the contract with Dromit. It stated that whoever obtains the star of the mountain buried by the star and learns the true name of its mountain guardian would become the new master. The mountain guardian must obey the new master's commands, and the content of the contract must never be known by anyone. If anyone else learned about it, the one who broke the contract would die from the curse of the pact. But in Randolph's mind, he only said it because he remembered the legend. Good thing the rules of the game still worked. And as expected, because he was now Randolph and not Wilhelm, the curse didn't affect him, because technically, Wilhelm was the one bound by the contract.
Dromit stared at Drandolph again and asked who he really was, but Drandolph didn't answer. Drandolph only said that if Dromit wanted to know who he really was, then he should guide him. The star would prove his true identity. Dromit said the star showed no mercy to those without qualification, and he would be burned by its fire the moment he approached it. Randolph confidently replied that maybe that would happen, but why not see for themselves? He even jokingly asked Dromit if he was afraid that the star might recognize him as its true master. Anger filled Dromit's eyes. He said it was ridiculous that a weak being like Randolph, someone he could crush with a single bite, had the courage to boast in front of him. But even through his anger, Dromit turned around and told Randolph to follow him, and he would lead him to the star. He added that he did not believe Randolph was Wilhelm, but because he knew about the contract, Dromit felt it wasn't right to kill him. As he crawled forward to guide them, he said it would be better to let the star finish Randolph off. When they reached the star's location, Isabella could not believe what she was seeing. In a dark place stood an ancient altar that seemed to be in the middle of nowhere, and this was where the star was? Randolph answered yes. The object on the altar was their goal, the star. On top of a stone with a star symbol rested a skull. Isabella asked Randolph if the skull was the star they were looking for. Randolph looked back and said yes, but it was more accurate to say it was the face of Leah. Randolph explained that when Leah, the twin goddess of Pangea, died, her body split into 32 pieces and scattered across the continent, and those 32 pieces are what they now call stars. Randolph smiled as he held the skull. He thought about how these so-called stars were used by the players of Pangea as boundary catalysts to achieve transcendence. Suddenly, Randolph became serious. A giant pillar of fire appeared in the center of the altar. When Isabella saw it, she screamed and asked if everything was all right. Dramit laughed, saying he warned him that he would burn the moment he approached the star. In his mind, serves you right. Even if you walk confidently toward the star, in the end it still rejects you. Burn, you pathetic creature. But amid the raging flames, a silhouette appeared. It was Randolph, holding the glowing skull, surrounded by swirling fire. He looked toward Dramit and Isabella. He must have heard Dramit's words. He looked at what he was holding. He knew that the star would attack and kill you in an instant if you obtained it without facing Dramit first. In his mind, regardless of the chaos, he faced Dramit, so he saw no problem. The only thing he wondered about was whether he would receive the character class he wanted. From what he remembered, if you obtained a star without a class, the star would give you one. But he wasn't sure because he had never tested it. He only learned about it by accident. As he held the glowing, flaming skull in the middle of the raging fire, his traits began to appear, one by one. Then the skull vanished from his hands. He felt power suddenly flow into him, and system notifications appeared one after another. They said his mana was converted into star energy, and that he received the main skill, Star Pierce Level 1, the sub-skill, Blessings of the Star Level 1, a star effect of all stats +5, and that his power would increase further once he obtained more stars, and even if he reached transcendence, these star effects would not disappear. The last system notification said he received the character class Star Successor. Randolph looked at the skull fading away from his hands. Isabella could not believe it. The skull, the star, suddenly vanished from Randolph's hand. As Randolph absorbed his new power, he called Isabella and asked her what she wanted to do once the curse was removed from her. Isabella was shocked by the question, but she answered quickly, saying she wanted to leave the desert and find the family of the Dursian. Randolph said he would bless her so she could leave the desert on one condition. Isabella asked what it was. Randolph said Isabella must serve him for 1 year. After that, she would be free, and he would help her find her family. Isabella paused to think. She remembered the Desert Queen she once served. But while Isabella was remembering this, Randolph placed his hand on her shoulder. He directly told her that he was not the Desert Queen, and that none of his words were lies. Isabella was shocked by what Randolph said, momentarily frozen. But she knelt before Randolph and declared that she would serve him. Randolph said she made the right decision. Then he turned to Dramit and asked if it was true that the one who possessed the star was his master. Dramit began to sweat, nervously stuttering a yes. After hearing Dramit's answer, Randolph pointed at Dramit and ordered him to bow and follow. Another system window appeared, saying his quest, obtain a class, was complete. Then another window appeared, saying several combat-oriented constellations were beginning to take interest in him. Far away, the Desert Queen's expression grew unreadable, as if she felt something. Sitting on her throne before her warriors, she announced that Isabella had entered the sanctuary with the slave she had captured. She commanded them to immediately capture the two.
Let's return to the real world, inside a cafe. Inside, 3 people were talking. One of them asked if it was really true that Randolph was the one they called Phantom. Another answered that he was certain, because even if they ignored the results of Main Quest 1, getting a higher class score than Gracia was impossible unless you knew everything about the game Pangea. One of the men said that the 5-year veteran player, known as Phantom, had finally appeared, and he was sure this would cause huge trouble. Another asked if they could contact him before someone else found him. The woman in the group asked how they planned to do that, when they had already been looking for him for 5 years, but never saw him at all.
One of the men explained that the reason they never found Phantom was because the player had only recently become someone like them, and now that he was the same as them, there might finally be a way to locate him. Another man suggested that they try what was called the fishing strategy, because the secret auction hall had reopened as a reward for Main Quest 2. He thought that Phantom might use it. The woman thought about the fishing strategy because she figured Phantom would need a lot of equipment if he wanted to stay ahead for the next Main Quest 3. The fishing strategy could be done in the secret auction hall, where players could trade. The plan: you put a high-quality item in the auction for a very cheap price, then use the ability of a talisman called Twin to place a location tracking ability on whomever buys the item. New players who didn't know about this were usually fooled and bought the cheap item, which led to them being tracked, robbed, and sometimes even killed. But one of their companions asked if someone like Phantom would fall for such a trap. If Randolph was really Phantom, then he definitely knew all the abilities of the talismans in the game. But the woman answered, trembling, that Phantom might fall for it. The others were confused by what she said. Then suddenly the woman's expression changed, as if she were delirious. She said that even if Phantom failed, he was still the one who began the Great Expedition, and she was probably referring to the Demon Realm expedition. That kind of determined decision-making was not normal. She continued that there was a huge chance that if Phantom saw the cheap item in the auction hall, he would immediately decide to buy it, and if other players wanted to challenge him using the talisman's ability, then they could do what they wanted. But once Phantom targeted you, it would definitely be your end. For the woman, that was the Phantom she knew. Wow. A fangirl already, and we're only in Chapter 6, and we already have a fangirl. But for the woman, no matter how dangerous the plan was, they still needed to meet and get to know Phantom and invite him into their guild. The two men eventually had to call the police because the woman's thoughts were getting too dangerous. The police, who had no idea what was going on, looked confused and even signaled the caller asking if they needed help. And just like that, their conversation wandered away from the topic and turned into endless gossip from the woman about who Phantom really was and what his real identity might be. Was he a CEO of some huge corporation? Or an heir of a business empire? Maybe we could even include the possibility that he was actually a superhero, since that was basically her fantasy anyway. A system message appeared and was sent to all players. The Hall of Fame had changed. The new ranking list showed Randolph in the first position with 230 points. It also stated that the Main Quest 2 rights of the player Massacre had been revoked, including his qualification to enter this secret auction. Player Massacre was currently reading the message, but he seemed less concerned about losing his privileges and more focused on the information that Randolph had 230 points. He asked himself what kind of character class could give such high points. While sitting and resting, he said that it looks like he wouldn't be joining the secret auction for a while, but he didn't really care. But in one corner of the place he was in, several lifeless bodies lay on the floor, fear still visible on their faces. Holding one of them by the hair, he said that as long as he killed whoever was on top of the rankings, he would immediately return to the rankings. This character is extremely brutal. Dranup moved quickly, like a train rushing straight ahead. Randolph and Isabella were riding on his back. System window notifications kept appearing before Randolph, telling him that the subquest Sanctuary Exploration had been completed, and the completion rate had reached 100%, an unbelievable score even if he saw it with his own eyes. Randolph became the first to achieve a perfect clear in the Desert Sanctuary. He also received a new achievement, the Conqueror of a Sanctuary. First, he also received a teleport book as a completion reward. It could teleport the user to any previously visited place, and its registered destination was the Desert Sanctuary. As Isabella was curiously observing, Randolph was happily thinking that the transport method he came up with was excellent, very comfortable, not what he expected. This way, they could escape the sanctuary quickly after finishing their investigation. Then another system window appeared, announcing that Randolph had gathered enough experience to level up. I'm not sure anymore, but it feels like this system window is practically a character now, appearing more often than the Desert Queen. In the character window, Randolph's stats and talents increased, but he also noticed that the more talents he had, the more experience he needed per level. The experience he required was 10 times higher than normal. But Randolph brushed it off since his stats were higher than normal anyway. What mattered more was the reward he received from the main quest. Randolph was extremely excited about his equipment reward because it was rare for someone with low level like him. Isabella was watching what he was doing, confused. What was going on? One of the items he received was the Shadow Cloak. When used, it made the wearer invisible, a free stealth skill. Well, who wouldn't be excited? A free skill on top of a free skill. But as Randolph was thinking, Dranot suddenly stopped. The red eyes looked serious. He sensed the presence of approaching enemies. They were moving fast. He informed Randolph, though Randolph didn't understand. Isabella said it was probably the Desert Queen's warriors sent to chase them. Randolph realized they indeed had stayed too long inside the sanctuary. Isabella asked him what the plan was. It was unlikely the Desert Queen herself would chase them, but her deployed troops would be enough to capture them. Even if they counted Dranot, the mountain guardian, she wasn't sure they could face them directly. Then Randolph asked why they needed to fight anyway. Dranot was the guardian of this place. Isabella suddenly realized everything and pieced it together. Randolph quickly escaped with Isabella, telling Dranot to handle everything. Dranot was left standing there in shock. Poor Dranot. By the time Dranot realized what had happened, it was too late. He couldn't believe they simply left him behind to face the Desert Queen's warriors alone.
Randolph and Isabella ran fast, and soon they heard the desert warriors' battle cries. They probably found Dranot. Isabella looked back and asked Randolph if it was really okay to leave him alone. When it came to running, our protagonist had this every man for himself mindset. Randolph had no intention of stopping. He reminded the Snake Princess that she herself said the Desert Queen wouldn't come personally, so everything would be fine. He was sure the full army hadn't arrived yet. The advance unit was the one fighting Dranot. He then said that if they slowed down and the full army arrived, the entire sanctuary might get surrounded, making escape extremely difficult. And besides, they were the real targets, so they needed to run. Isabella thought they abandoned Dranot because he was no longer useful, but Randolph said mountain guardians couldn't leave their assigned areas. Only the two of them could escape. Randolph planned to use the warp gate at the end of the desert. He had already removed the curse on Isabella, so she would be able to use it too. Randolph stopped running. They had reached the edge of the desert, where a massive gate stood. This was probably the exit, but the problem was that the gate required time to activate. Isabella stared at the huge gate. This was her long-time dream, once they passed this place, but she couldn't bring herself to finish her sentence. So Randolph continued. He said that once they crossed this place, they would leave the desert, but the gate needed enough time before they could use it. Isabella asked how long. Randolph answered that it would take half a day. In the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, Randolph and Isabella stood before the massive structure. Randolph said there was nowhere to hide here. It would be ideal if the entire army went to the sanctuary, but it was highly possible that they would spread out to search for them. For now, the warriors were still fighting Dranot, so they had some time. Randolph looked at Isabella and said that at this moment he needed to speak with the stars. Randolph knew the place was important and their situation was dangerous, but he needed to see what was happening in reality, so he had to log out. He directly asked Isabella if he could trust her. She was shocked, but she immediately grabbed her weapon. She walked slowly, preparing herself to fight, and told Randolph, "I will protect you." Then Randolph logged out. Returning to reality, we see Park Hyun-myung lying on his bed. Let me remind you, Randolph and Park Hyun-myung are the same person. Randolph in Panjunia, Park Hyun-myung in reality. He got up, still not used to the strange feeling of switching bodies, but despite that, he immediately looked for his phone. He checked for new information. Since there was nothing in the news, and no disaster warnings, it seemed the monster still hadn't appeared in reality. Reality and Pangaea were slowly merging. He was sure of it, But there were many things he still didn't know. Many monsters would appear in the future, and the many players in reality also worried him. So he decided he needed to return to Pangea and reality in regular intervals to gather information. After all, it was dangerous to be clueless. While checking information, he noticed something. Our protagonist's expression suddenly turned irritated. A message from his ex-girlfriend arrived. At this point, the scene shifts elsewhere. We see Park Hyun-myung's ex-girlfriend talking to someone on her phone. Her voice seemed loud because people around her were staring. Even the employees stopped to eavesdrop. She finally ended the call. She sat there complaining how annoying the person she talked to was. She remembered the day she broke up with Park Hyun-myung. She thought that even though he was useless, he still always listened to her. In her mind, she felt she should have endured a little longer. As Seon was thinking that maybe if Park Hyun-myung had money, she wouldn't have broken up with him, our protagonist arrived. She smiled and said she was glad he came early because she thought she would wait a long time. But Hyun-myung immediately asked her why she called him and why it sounded like she had something important to discuss. Seon said they should talk first, and if he wasn't doing anything, he should sit down. Our protagonist sat. The woman said that maybe because it had been a long time since they last met, his vibe seemed different. Of course he's the protagonist now. The protagonist. But Hyun-myung didn't look impressed. He told her that if she needed something, she should say it now because he also had to leave soon. You are the man, Park Hyun-myung. Sigma vibes. Sigma vibes. But in Seon's mind, she thought he was just acting. She said that no matter what, something hadn't changed. She smiled while looking at him and said he always came whenever she called him, even now. Yeah, Hyun-myung, why? Why didn't you at least arrive a little late? Without blinking, Seon said that since they broke up, she realized how good he actually was, that she always thought about him and regretted everything. But Hyun-myung wasn't paying attention anymore. Wow, Sigma style. He was more bothered by the fact that she called him to this place and didn't even offer him a drink. Wow, Park Hyun-myung, I'm so proud. Then suddenly, our protagonist stood up, clearly out of patience, and said that if she was done talking, he would leave. The woman was shocked. She couldn't believe it. As Hyun-myung walked away, Seon shouted, asking if he didn't hear her dramatic confession that she missed him, and that maybe he was still upset about what she said when they broke up. But she didn't finish speaking because Hyun-myung suddenly responded. While turning to look at her like a scene straight out of a movie, he asked if her new boyfriend knew she was meeting him. Seon froze. She couldn't believe he knew. Hyun-myung kept walking as she tried to stop him. He thought that if this had happened before, he probably would have panicked and wouldn't know what to say, but now he felt strangely calm. Maybe Randolph's growth was starting to affect reality. But as he walked, he noticed a crowd up ahead. It looked like something was happening. My gosh, this part really feels like a movie. A man angrily yanked a woman's hair and suddenly pulled out a knife. He shouted at the people around them, asking what they were looking at. The woman screamed, begging him to let her go. Without hesitation, the man prepared to stab her, yelling that everyone underestimated him and that he would kill her. The woman closed her eyes because she couldn't break free. But suddenly, someone stopped the attack. He caught the man's wrist. Even though she was in pain, she tried to see who helped her, while the man furiously demanded to know who dared interfere. Hyun-myung looked at the man seriously and told him to stop. Wow, he really looked like the main character now.